Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. On today's show, the shocking scandal of a former priest facing criminal charges for the theft of hundreds of thousands of dollars from a Gurdwara set of donations in Winnipeg. In the United States, the New York Senate passes a significant resolution recognising not just the massive contribution of the state's Sikh population to society, but importantly, India's mass murders of Sikhs in 1984. Meanwhile, in India, a political storm is brewing between regions and central government. Even the BBC is beginning to notice the fractures widening between potential separatist states like Punjab and Tamil Nadu. We take a look at the potential implications. And in Canada, excitement builds as Sikh Heritage Month kicks off this weekend in Surrey, British Columbia. Well, joining me as always on today's show is our Perspectives correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another episode. I hope you're doing well on that side of the pond, Angus, as I hope our audience is doing great wherever they are sending those amazing messages from. We love all your comments and encourage you to keep them coming because not only does it keep us in touch with you and what's important to you, but it also helps us in the algorithms to bump up the show to get more audience members. So remember to like the videos, share them, and of course, subscribe to the channel. Back to you, Angus.
Indeed. Please don't forget to do that. And meanwhile, James and I together will be bringing you our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world. And at the end of the show, as usual, we'll take a look at loads of your great comments. So thank you, as always, for those. Right, James, let's get the show underway. What are you going to start us off with this morning?
Big breaking news out of Winnipeg in Manitoba, one of our prairie provinces where not much usually happens. So this is really a big surprise in many ways. And right now it appears that there is a priest who is not only facing criminal charges, but of course also, sorry about that. Also facing a lawsuit from the Gurdwara where it is alleged that he has taken over $420,000. Now, this is from donations that he has been squandering out the back door, so to speak, for several years and looking up to 14 years that he was at the Gurdwara. And it is a shocking revelation to the community and to, of course, the Gurdwaras across the province and across Canada. Now, one of the bright sides, if there is such a thing in such a case, is that the other Gurdwaras across Canada are helping to step up and assist with, donations and other ways to help the Gurdwara get through this devastating act by this priest. Now, apparently, it has come to light that he is facing several charges, including theft over $5,000, among others. But the lawsuit that has been filed is claiming that the Gurdwara had a priest there, and he was by the name of Mr. Singh, or Sukhwinder Singh, and he has actually been there for 13 years, allegedly stole thousands of dollars in cash donations from the congregants. The lawsuit claims that Singh used the funds for personal gain, including purchasing a home in Winnipeg and also acquiring assets overseas in India. Now, the allegations came to light last September when a volunteer observed Mr. Singh handling large quantities of cash in a suspicious manner. A review of the security camera footage revealed that Singh removed cash from donation boxes and then he concealed them in plastic boxes wrapped in bed sheets and taken to his living quarters on site. Now, the court document further alleges that Singh's actions were a clear breach of trust and a violation of Sikh customs, and emphasizing the importance of honesty and integrity. And I was shocked when I saw this because it goes against those very principles that we respect of the Sikh culture and religion. Now, as a head priest, Singh was responsible for handling those cash donations, which could be dropped off at the temple or made at services such as weddings and other gatherings within the Gurdwara. The investigation by the Winnipeg Police Service revealed that Singh had about $420,000 cash in his possession, which was seized by the police. And it further alleges that Singh may have misappropriated as much as $1.5 to $2 million over the 13 years he's been there. A lot of the bills that were seized were $50s and $100 bills, But it is just shocking that these revelations have come out and that it is happening. Now, Singh has fled the territory of Winnipeg, or the region, and he is still facing the court case, the civil case moving forward with or without him. And that's one difference between the criminal courts and the civil courts, is that they can continue in absentia, meaning that if the person fails to appear, they have the option to either put the case over and put an arrest warrant out for the individual, or they can move forward and just try the facts that are available, and this person loses their opportunity to defend themselves when they fail to show up. Now, this is very concerning that the priest salary is about $12,000 annually, and the obligations to the temple, to his personal expenses and such, it would be impossible for him to purchase a home worth over $300,000 in the community of Winnipeg. And that, of course, has been seized in terms of the fact that it has been frozen. They cannot sell that home. It cannot be transferred in terms of ownership to any other entity or individual until this case plays out, as it may be seized as profits made from criminal activities, and also could be sold off to try to compensate some of the losses by the Gurdwara. Now, again, this individual has fled from the Winnipeg area. They are seeking to locate him, so if anybody comes into contact or is aware of his whereabouts, it's encouraged that you do contact either the Winnipeg Police Service or the Gurdwara directly in Winnipeg, Manitoba. And again, best option for expediency is that if he is in a territory or a community outside of Winnipeg, just contact your local police and explain that he is wanted in the Winnipeg area for a major theft from people that entrusted him. It is just such a breach of trust and such a breach of the Sikh principles that I am just shocked, Angus, that it has taken place at all.
Yeah, it is quite shocking, actually. And one can only hope for his own health's sake that the police find him before the, let's say, a group of Nihangs find him, because certainly the Sikh community are pretty ruthless against those who betray or do acts like this against the community. The community is very tight-knit, and it is obviously bound together by enormously powerful, fundamental, great principles. And this guy, as I say, it just sits so anomalously, so differently to the community as a whole. But the reality is, we're all human beings, and of course you have any pot of human beings, there's always going to be one likely who is that bad apple, that one guy who just gets a little bit tempted. At the end of the day, he's a human being. We all have our failings. So unfortunately, it's actions like this that do unfortunately gift the enemies of the community easy propaganda to say, oh, look, they're all a bunch of criminals or whatever, because we do know that Hindutva seize on stories like this and spin them into something that they're not, and they always try and use it to beat the community with. So this guy has really, it's not just the theft of this enormous amount of money, it's the propaganda value to the enemies of the community. That's the real danger here. But yeah, it's just to clarify, James, is that US dollars or Canadian dollars?
That would be Canadian dollars, Angus. So you're probably looking at about 420,000. You're probably looking at about 330,000 US dollars.
Yeah, so it's an enormous sum of money. I mean, that is a life-changing amount of money. It's a huge amount of money, which in itself just gives a scale to this crime over so many years. It's just absolutely enormous. As you say, it could go literally above $1 million, which again just gives an idea of how big this crime is. But as always, there is a positive spin on this. The one takeaway I took from this: what an enormous amount of money that's been donated to the Gurdwara. This Gurdwara has received this amount of money from the community. And that really, I think, is the real story, the real positive story about this. This actually just demonstrates the goodness of Sikhi, the goodness of the community. And we see this across all sorts of contexts, is that we do know, as part of being a Sikh, is that there is this obligation, this moral obligation to donate. It's not just self selfless service, but it's also donating a portion of your hard-earned money to the community. And this is usually channeled through the Gurdwaras. And again, this just highlights to the wider world, and I think this is what people need to pick out of this story, particularly in the wider press, is that look how much money's been donated to this Gurdwara over the years from a relatively small community. That's how generous the community is. Those are the principles of the community at large. Not just one bad apple, one bad guy who gave into temptation. That's always going to happen in every community. What really matters is look at the generosity of the community. Look at the principles of the community that has donated this amount of money to the Gurdwara to be used for good around the community, not just within the Sikh community, but the community as a whole, James. That's the really good news out of this story.
Exactly. And to really compile that even larger, Angus, is that the Winnipeg Sikh population is only about 33,000 strong. So when you take into account the number of people versus the donations, it just shows the extreme generosity that the Sikh community has. And that money doesn't just go to the Gurdwara, it goes to helping the whole community and outreach programs, feeding programs, all kinds of different things where they jump in and help the overall community, not just the Sikh community. So it just shows how grateful the Winnipeg and the, all communities should be to the generosity and the community service work that the Sikh community does. And when we look at that $420,000, Angus, it is just what they located in his residence on site. That, as I said, could hit $1.5 to $2 million Canadian over the 13 years that he was working at that Gurdwara. So just a shame that this happened. And hopefully he is located and faces the consequences of those actions. And I know that the Sikh community across Canada is watching very closely for him to be brought before the justice and to be sentenced or to be, tried for these crimes. It's just disgusting as to what he has done. But moving on to brighter sides, Angus, coming up starting on April the 1st, of course, is the annual Sikh month in Canada. And this actually kicks off in British Columbia. The annual Sikh Heritage Month goes on every year, and it is encompassing of many different events that not only look to celebrate Sikh history and culture, but also to bridge the gap between the Sikh community and all other people of faith or of non-faith in the communities as well. And we know that we follow this every year, and that includes this year. I will attend some of the events starting actually this Sunday, although technically not into April yet. There will be a large gathering at the City of Surrey City Hall. And at that event, they are going to have all kinds of different cultural demonstrations, dancing, food, just a lot of fun to kick it off. And also the presentation of, I believe it is five different scholarships to youth in the community who have been doing well, and to help them with furthering their education after high school. So it is just a great event. It will also have educational seminars so that people can learn about the culture and the history. They can learn about the impacts of Sikhi in the communities. Again, it brings such an excitement every year because it also happens to fall in April when we see the huge Vaisakhi parade that will happen in Surrey, the largest one that happens outside of the borders of India. So it is just an amazing month of events surrounding the Sikh community. Now, this also marks, in terms of coincidence, it marks the anniversary of the several historically significant events in British Columbia Sikh history. And that actually is May 23rd, 2025, just a little further down the road, will mark the 110th anniversary of the arrival of the Kamagata Maru. And that was a Japanese steamship that arrived in Canada, and more precisely Vancouver's harbor, carrying 376 passengers, and most of those were of Sikh heritage and faith. and they were seeking a better life in Canada. Now, infamously, the ship was actually turned around by Canadian immigration authorities in an incident that would become a rallying cry for Indian independence and a symbol of Canada's restrictive immigration policies back in that day. So again, it is a very big celebration, but also an awareness of the history and the struggles of the Sikh people. Additionally, Angus, 2025 also marks the 100th anniversary of the founding of the Khalistan Society, one of the oldest Sikh organizations in North America, and that was actually established in 1925 by a group of Sikh pioneers who settled in the Fraser Valley, just up the highway from myself here, about 20 minutes. And they played a crucial role in promoting Sikhism and advocating for the rights of Sikh immigrants in Canada. And again, we revert back to that ship that was turned away, and we know that they had a vital and pivotal role to make changes there and to pressure those changes for, long term. Now, the committee has said that we are proud of the contribution to British Columbia of the Canadian Sikh community, and they look forward to sharing the story with the wider community. And again, on the 29th at Surrey City Hall, they will feature performances, speeches, and exhibitions showcasing Sikh art, history, and culture, and it's open to the public, so everyone is welcome to attend. If you are in Surrey, British Columbia, I strongly encourage you to come out and check it out. I will be there, and look forward to seeing you there as well. And in a final part of that, Angus, we have spoken about education of Sikh culture in classrooms. And a part of this is that the Sikh history or Sikh culture and the Sikh Heritage Month sees a lot of different programs in our schools to also bring the voices and the stories into the classrooms. And if you are a teacher or know a teacher, you can actually get the education packages that are approved by the Ministry of Education in the province of British Columbia for curricula. You can find that at the Sikh Heritage BC website, which is on the screen. And there you can also find a full listing of all of the activities happening throughout the month to celebrate Sikh heritage in British Columbia, Angus. It is usually very exciting and a lot of great educational and excitingly fun events.
Yes, it's really important. Events like this are so significant for many reasons, not least because it does show to the wider community. It's an opportunity for the community to educate the wider community about not just the heritage, but about the contribution that the community gives to the wider community, and also the effects of the charity that come from the seva, the selfless service. It's all about education. This is a word that we talk a lot about, education, because of course the average citizen in any nation, when they see a Sikh walking down the street, they just see a guy with a turban on, and they just, well, what does that mean? It's events like this that provide the opportunity, whether it's through displays or opening at museums or whatever it is, or even just a simple chat in the street, just engaging with somebody to explain, I wear a turban because ... And it's just educating people who actually probably are genuinely curious about stuff like this. So this is a great opportunity for this. And I do, in fact, I remember, James, last year you covered the arrival of the Sikhs in Canada, the 100 and whatever it was years ago. And it's a fascinating story. And I think what's also particularly fascinating about this is how history can literally turn on simple events like this ship being potentially turned around. You think if it had been turned around, those 300 and something Sikhs had not arrived in Canada at all, had been turned away, they'd gone elsewhere. You think how the local history would have changed. You think of over that 100 years or more, how the Sikhs who have landed in Canada, how their lives have created and built all these businesses, these communities, these whole societies within Canadian society. It's fascinating from a purely humanity point of view, what an impact such events can have as they unfold over the decades and the centuries. So, but yeah, as we know, the community in British Columbia has had a huge contribution to the general society in Canada. I think events like this are great opportunities. If you're there locally, or indeed even just within driving distance, get down there. Go talk to to people, go engage with the wider public, people who are outside the community, and just talk to them, because I've no doubt they will be delighted to understand and learn about Sikhi, what it means to be a Sikh, and what these guys wearing turbans actually represent. Because as we often talk about on a daily basis, James, Sikhi has so much to offer the world. The whole community has so much to offer the world, and people need to get out there and educate people. This is who we are. This is what we represent, James.
Absolutely, Angus. And up on the screen there, you can see the historical marker plaque that was the location where we did a live show from last year, if you recall. And that's in Golden, British Columbia, a small town at the edge of the Canadian Rocky Mountains, more a ski resort, and then of course a resource town, still focused on lumber and other natural resources. But it just goes to show the depths of this community within the province. It's not just in Surrey or the Lower Mainland. They have hit all pockets and all parts of the province to bring a lot of historical value and development to Canada. So again, if you are watching and hosting events for Sikh Heritage Month here in British Columbia, especially in the Lower Mainland, by all means reach out at the email Angus will provide at the end of the show, because I'm always happy to be a guest and to come out and celebrate Sikh history, Sikh culture, and to help raise awareness and education of that. So again, if you're having an event, by all means, I'm more than happy to come out if I can fit it in the schedule. So we'll look forward to being at a lot of events that are on the calendar. But again, let me know if there's something that you would really like me to attend. I'll be there and we'll report on it on the show, Angus.
Absolutely. And what an opportunity if you're in that community. Go out and meet James in person. What a pleasure that would be, James.
And it's funny, Angus, because every time I go out in the community and meet everybody, they're always asking where you are. It's you that they love, Angus.
Gosh, almost like celebrities. Isn't it great? Wonderful. Right, James, let's move on to serious matters now. And over in India, as I said in the introduction, there is a bit of a political storm brewing, and it's a storm that's been brewing for a long time. There's been a lot of problems, and we often talk about all the various contexts about the potential breakup of India. Well, a lot of that is rooted in the regional differences. Of course, the huge differences, whether it's economic, whether it's cultural, whatever, the massive differences between the various regions of India. And economics plays a huge part in this, and of course, it's the politics that will decide ultimately what happens to India over the coming decades, the coming years and decades. Well, this political storm is really rooted in some fairly significant political elements. And this particular story was written by the BBC. It was an investigation by the BBC who reported on this. And even they are recognising that these fractures, these political fractures between the regions in India are starting to become very significant indeed. And as I say, this does lead on to bigger implications that we often talk about. And in this particular story, they're focusing mainly on the southern regions of India. And it's the southern regions of India that the leaders of these areas are calling for a mass mobilisation, as they call it, to protect the southern part of India's political interests, because there's this huge controversy growing over the redrawing of electoral seats or electoral constitutional boundaries to reflect changes in population over time. Now, it's all about what's called delimitation. And delimitation is what's been described as a Damocles sword hanging over southern India. The Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu has called it this Damocles sword. Now, Tamil Nadu is one of 5 southern states in India who really have been going head-to-head with Narendra Modi's BJP. The other 4 states, apart from Tamil Nadu, include Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, Kerala and Telangana. Now, these 5 states account for 20% of India's overall 1.4 billion population. They also outperform the rest of the country in health, education and indeed in economics. So there's a huge difference. There's a huge difference between southern India and the northern, particularly the central belt of India. Also, a child is less likely to be born in southern India than in the north. They've got lower population growth rates. Now, the leaders are worried that the more prosperous south may lose parliamentary seats in the future. And they see this as a punishment for having fewer children but generating more wealth. Wealthier southern states have always contributed more to federal revenue, with poorer, highly populated states in the north receiving larger shares based on need. So in other words, the southern parts of India are contributing more and receiving less. And of course, unsurprisingly, this is causing increasing fractures and increasing anger. Now, in India, the constitution states very clearly that there should be a fair allocation of voting proportions. Really, in simple logistical terms, it means that every one person in India, wherever they are across India, should have an equal voice in the governance. Now, India, as a result, has redrawn the parliamentary map, the constitutional map, 3 times based on the decennial census. That's every 10 years they hold a census, and it was held in 51. And this redrawing of the boundaries of each area, each voting area, has been redrawn 3 times, and it was redrawn in 51, 61 and 71. But since then, governments have stopped this exercising because they fear an imbalance of representation due to varying fertility rates across the different states, so different birth rates. Now, this delimitation exercise, the next one is planned for next year. But India hasn't conducted a census since 2011. There should have been one in 2021, but there wasn't one for whatever reason in 2021. And there's still no clear timeline for when this next one should take place. And this has created a potential crisis. Now, Tamil Nadu is leading the charge, and India is on the brink of federal deadlock, according to one expert observer on this. Now, despite India's growing population, the number of Lok Sabha seats per state hasn't changed. In 1951, each MP in the Lok Sabha represented just over 700,000 people. So for every 700,000 people, there was one MP in the Lok Sabha. Today, that's surged to 2.5 million people per MP. So each MP in the Lok Sabha represents 2.5 million. That's more than 3 times the population represented by a member of the US House of Representatives in the US. In the UK, each one of our MPs represents 120,000 people. So that gives you an idea of how diluted each Indian voice is in Indian politics. Now, for example, in Uttar Pradesh, that's India's most populous state with over 240 million people, each MP represents around 3 million people. In Kerala, in the south, each MP represents 1.75 million. So immediately you can start to see the differences between the north and south. So this means the average voter in Kerala has 1.7 times more influence in choosing an MP than a voter in Uttar Pradesh in the north. So if this delimitation exercise takes place, it means that Tamil Nadu could potentially lose 8 seats or more next year in the Lok Sabha. That means that state will lose 8 MPs. That's really significant. India is no longer living up to its fundamental constitutional principles of one person, one vote. And this is where this tension is now rising, this political tension is now rising. Now, various solutions have been proposed. One option is just simply to increase the number of seats in the House. And this would actually mean that the Lok Sabha would increase from 500 and something, whatever it is now, up to over 1,800 seats. Now, this actually presents a simple logistical problem because the new parliament only has capacity for 880 seats. So immediately that creates a problem. They can have, alternatively, another suggestion is to have a more decentralised fiscal system. In other words, give these southern states a bit more autonomy, give them, and this is the key word, give them a little bit more control and autonomy over their economies, and they actually retain a lot of their revenue that they generate. And other proposals like splitting big states. India's top 5 states have more than 45% share of total states. So again, we're talking about splitting, breaking up, or giving more autonomy, etc. So these are really, really important but controversial words. And political scientist Suhas Palshikar has warned that the north-south divide threatens India's federal structure. As Suhas Palshikar says, the north-south prism is only likely to persuade people and parties of the north to push for delimitation that would give them an advantage. And of course, by implication, that means it gives the south a disadvantage. And that, again, starts getting very significant. Balancing representation will be the key to preserving India's strained federal spirit. Now, This, of course, the subtext of all this, the real story of all this, is this political tension that's being created. We've talked and we've heard a lot about Tamil Nadu's increasing unhappiness about the current state of Indian politics. And here, with this delimitation exercise, it's a very political, arcane sort of thing that's happening. But what it basically means in simple terms, it means Tamil Nadu is facing less voice in Parliament, in the Lok Sabha. So Tamil Nadu are going to start saying, hang on a second, we're not just having a decreased birth rate, we're not just actually contributing a much bigger proportion of money, revenue into the central Indian coffers, we're getting less back. We're not just getting less back in revenue of money that we're generating, we're also getting less of a political voice. You guys up in the north who have this huge birth rate, you're reproducing at a much faster rate. We're paying for all this. So what are we getting out of this? And that's the key, James. This really is the story here. It means that Tamil Nadu is going to start saying, hang on a second, what? Excuse me, why are we doing this? Why are we putting up with this? Why shouldn't we have more autonomy? Why shouldn't we have more say? And in fact, of course, the logical conclusion is, why shouldn't we break away from India? Yes, unsurprisingly, and if you look back over history, Tamil Nadu has had a very healthy separatist movement. And it's things like this that are feeding that machine, that separatist machine. And in fact, I think what I might do, maybe next week, even if it doesn't get bumped with more important stories, I might just give a rundown of the Tamil Nadu separatist movement, because of course it has been there very significantly for a very long time. It has actually had its roots in a very powerful political movement. There is a huge argument for Tamil Nadu to separate from the rest of India. And if you look at the whole story of the Tamil Nadu separatist movement, it is so reflective of the politics of Punjab. There's an awful lot that if we talk about the separatist movement really just is so similar to the story of Punjab. And for example, I'll just quickly read something that I read just as part of this research, was that the BJ's attempts to mainstream Hindi in Tamil Nadu have been met with widespread resistance. Tamil Nadu politicians argue that jobs, businesses and even government positions are being taken over by Hindi speakers from the north, pushing out Tamil professionals in their own states. It's become so intense that banking, law enforcement are being accused of being infiltrated by Hindi-speaking officials. It spreads across the Tamil Nadu government has repeatedly opposed Hindi as a compulsory subject in schools. Anti-Hindi protests have become routine. Yes, our Punjabi audience will recognise that. Doesn't that sound familiar? Yes, the Hindi BJP extremist right-wing nationalist government are doing exactly the same in Tamil Nadu as they have been doing in Punjab. So what does this mean? It means the separatist movement in Tamil Nadu is only just going to grow in support. It's going to grow in strength. The momentum is going to build in Tamil Nadu as well, James. So really, as I started off with a political exercise called delimitation, it's all very arcane, it's all very political. What does it all mean? Well, in reality, James, it means that the separatist movements in India are just growing with ammunition. This is just feeding the separatist movements. This is just once again feeding towards that inevitable conclusion that we just keep drawing. Even from almost an objective perspective, India is being held together by artificial means, and things like this are just increasing those fractures that ultimately are going to lead to this inevitable likelihood that India is going to break up, and that countries like Khalistan are just going to happen through natural processes.
Absolutely, Angus, and that's something that we've discussed time and time again, is the political makeup and the representation, or the lack of representation by a lot of the communities. And to give some context for our Canadian viewers, is that the average Canadian MP represents about 92,000 people. In Canada, there are approximately 650 different constituencies, and these individuals make about $203,000 per year Canadian, which is probably about $1.85 US. But in any event, it's that important because a lot of people look at politicians and say, oh, they're doing nothing when they're not in the parliament, that they have all these days off. But the realistic, or the reality is is that MPs, regardless whether they are in India, Canada, the UK or such, when they are not in Parliament, they are meeting with their represented audience. They are meeting with the public. They are meeting with special interest groups. They are meeting with business leaders. So they are actually taking ideas and also voicing the concerns of those within their constituency. If you have over 2 million people in your constituency, that greatly reduces the ability to represent them and to listen to everybody's concerns, or at least a good majority of the concerns of the overall community. So again, when you take that into account, people are going to feel that they have not got the representation that they desire and that they deserve within Parliament. And that is going to contribute to a growing demand for separatism. And that includes Khalistan and other communities that, or other regions that are looking to break away to become sovereign nations. And this is a real eye-opener for those who don't understand the issues. And this is a big one, Angus.
It is indeed. And even if you just look at it almost from a conceptual point of view, human society is a very fluid thing. And democracy works because it allows... humanity always moves to equilibrium. I always talk about equilibrium. Nature always moves towards equilibrium. And a functioning democracy always moves to a state of equilibrium, where votes people... and if there are disproportionates, if there's unfairness, then a democratic system allows that fluidity to operate. It allows things to move into that state of equilibrium where more people are happy. Now, the opposite to that is where you start introducing artificial barriers to that fluidity. You create, through totalitarianism is a prime example of this, where you artificially prevent the movement towards equilibrium. So in an undemocratic society, whether it's communism or whatever, that stops a democratic process of people and ideas moving to a state of happiness. It stops the tensions. And that's what's happening in India, is that this simple move to an equilibrium where everybody's happy is being prevented by the BJP. And this is why ultimately history has taught, Bangladesh is a prime recent example, history has always taught that in a functioning democracy it always moves to equilibrium, to a state of happiness, let's call it in simple terms. And if you prevent that prevention always breaks in the end. The powers of people are just too great. Ultimately, it's like a dam, that the power of people just builds up behind the dam until eventually people power breaks down that dam. The longer you hold it back, the more violent that breakage tends to be. And that's, as I say, in simple conceptual terms. So India better watch its back, because that is, as I say, is very inevitable. Right, James, let's move on to my second story. And I'm going to move across to New York now, the state of New York. And delighted to say, in New York State, the Senate has just passed a resolution yesterday which commemorates the Sikh massacre of 1984, officially recognising it through a state resolution. And this is marvellous news. And this resolution took two primary forms. First of all, it was recognising the massive contribution that the state's Sikh population have made towards the society and the growth and general success of New York as a state. But secondly, and perhaps even more importantly, it has recognised the terrible human rights breaches that occurred in 1984. Not just, I think that's an euphemism. It was just basically the mass murder of Sikhs. It didn't go as far as to use the word genocide. Unfortunately, that was an unfortunate outcome of this exercise. But it still did recognise that there was a mass murder, a massacre, as it called it, of Sikhs. Now, this resolution, I'll just quickly flick through the resolution itself, because it was made up of about 20 separate paragraphs where it does recognise the community. And I just want to pick out a few key paragraphs here which are worth highlighting. Whereas, it said, Sikhs have faced historical injustices, most noticeably in 1984, when thousands of Sikh men, women and children were attacked and killed in coordinated acts of violence across India, including in the capital territory of Delhi, the states of Jharkhand, Madhya Pradesh, and then it lists all various other states where these terrible atrocities occurred. It continues, this targeted and systematic violence has been recognised by some human rights organisations, historians and governments around the world as a genocide. So it does actually use the word genocide in the resolution. It doesn't state as a resolution it was a genocide, but it recognises that human rights organisations and many people and governments have recognised it as genocide. It's a slight nuance, but at least the word genocide does appear in this resolution. The Sikh community has demonstrated resilience and strength in the face of adversity, so it does recognise how robust the community has been and resilient, use that keyword resilient, against what has been perpetrated against the community. New York State, particularly Queens, New York, is home to a thriving Sikh population with numerous Gurdwaras. So it recognises the state does have a large community, and a big shout out to those of you watching in New York. I do know we do have an audience in New York, so big shout out. Hi guys, and good morning to you guys. In fact, it would be good evening maybe by the time you're watching this. And recognising the horrific events of 1984 is a crucial step towards acknowledging historical injustices, promoting awareness and standing in solidarity with the Sikh community. And it is resolved that the legislative body honours the strength, the resilience and the contributions of the Sikh community in New York State, acknowledging their vital role in the cultural and economic life of the state. And it's further resolved that the body recognises the contributions of the Sikh community and commemorates the Sikh massacre of 1984 through official recognition and remembrance. And I'm just going to play you a quick video. This is actually this was the proposer, the senator who was responsible, who headed up this resolution. This is Senator Jessica Ramos speaking in the Senate a couple of days ago.
In 1984, after the assassination of Indian Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, state-sanctioned violence was unleashed upon the Sikh community in India. Over the next several days, tens of thousands of Sikhs were brutally murdered. Women were assaulted and raped. Men were burned alive. Families were torn apart, and entire neighborhoods were set on fire. Sikh homes, businesses, and Gurdwaras, their sacred places of worship, were also destroyed. It was not a random act of violence, and while the federal government doesn't yet recognize it as such, it was a genocide. It was organized, it was deliberate, and it was carried out with the complicity of government officials. A coordinated effort to silence, oppress, and terrorize the Sikh people. And nearly 40 years later, survivors and human rights activists and organizations are still fighting for justice. Today, Sikhs still face persecution, not only in India, but across the world, including right here in the United States, where even after 9/11, the surveillance of the Muslim community was used as an excuse to scapegoat the Sikh community. This persecution continues through the ongoing scourge of transnational repression. To the survivors who are here with us today and the families who have lived through this unimaginable pain, we want you to know that you are seen and heard, and that we stand with you. Your fight for justice is our fight as well. Here in New York, we stand for justice and against religious persecution, and with the Sikh community in their pursuit of truth. Today is not just about remembrance, it's about action. It's about ensuring that voices are heard, that stories of survivors are told, and that no government anywhere in the world is allowed to commit such atrocities without consequences. Passing this resolution is a strong statement. It says that New York is a state built on diversity, inclusion, and justice, stands with the victims of the 1984 genocide, and it says that New York recognizes the pain and the suffering of the Sikh community, and it says that we will not allow history to be rewritten or erased. You are not alone, and your fight for justice is our fight too. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Now, this is important. Why is it important? Because if you notice in that very powerful speech that the Senator made, it wasn't just about referencing the atrocities of 1984. She put it in a modern context. She said, this persecution is ongoing. It is continuing through transnational repression. So why is that so important? Well, clearly, in the context of the whole Khalistan movement, one of the foundational principles of pushing the movement forward is to establish the fact that not only is the Sikh community still being persecuted by India, it is highlighting, it is showing that India is still is acting essentially illegally, not just immorally, but actually illegally. And this is one of the key foundations. This persecution, this ongoing current persecution of the Sikh community is critical from a legal perspective, particularly when talking to the United Nations, to establish, when India stands up to defend its position and arguing that the secessionist movement is illegal because it threatens the integrity of its national boundaries, one of the legal defences is that the Sikh population can demonstrate that its human rights are being treated detrimentally as opposed to the rest of the nation. And that is why the speeches like this are important, because it's establishing a legal marker that the Sikh population in the Punjab are being treated differently. Their human rights are not being respected in the Punjab. So it's a relatively small legal thing, but it's significant. It is a legal marker that is important to be established, so that when we come to the legal wrangling over the establishment of Khalistan, it means the United Nations will have no choice but to recognise that India's defence of its position legally is actually not credible. Is that the legal principle has been established that the Sikh population in the Punjab are being persecuted, and that is a significant part of this. So, James, as I say, it's well done to particularly the New York community. You're responsible for this. Well done. That is what active campaigning does. The political representatives have been lobbied. This has led to this resolution, and it's resolutions like this that provide that legal evidence that will ultimately go to the United Nations. This is how significant this is. It will go up that legal ladder to the United Nations so that the lawyers can present all these cases. Look, New York's recognised it, California's recognised it, all these other states around the world, and these nations and the governments have recognised it. It is therefore absolutely clear cut that India has been persecuting Sikhs, and therefore their defence against the establishment of Khalistan is not credible. There you go, James. That's why things like this are so important.
Absolutely, Angus. And let's face it, a lot of people, when they think of New York, they're thinking of what they see on TV and, the rough neighborhoods or, the crime or whatever. But New York is a beautiful state, and the people there really do look out for each other, because it is such a foundational building block of New York, not only the city, but the entire state, that was built on immigration, that was built on people seeking a better life to achieve that American dream. And of course, this goes a long way, because it really shows that they care about all parts of the community, every member, every group. And for them to stand up and recognize this, and to not just call it a riot. They may not have used the term genocide directly in some parts of it, but they did recognize that it was a genocide in others. And to take it to a point of calling it a massacre was at least a step up from calling it the riots, which is what India wants everybody to look at it as less of an organized and coordinated effort to eradicate the Sikh community and their faith and culture. And that's what it was. It was a genocide aimed at reducing or eliminating the Sikhs back in that time. And of course, I was very happy to see that she also included the transnational repression and the foreign interference that continues today, and the ongoing threat to the Sikh community and other minorities in the state of New York, in the United States of America, and around the world, including in India. So I think that it's very powerful. Senator Jessica Ramos, I take my hat off to you. I really respect that she delivered such a passionate passionate and heartfelt speech and really isolated the facts and drove that message home. And I was very happy also to see some of the Sikh community there in the observation benches and there to listen to what she had to say. So again, Angus, I think that the New York 1984 resolution is very powerful. And again, I have much respect to the state of New York for doing this.
Absolutely, indeed. Right, James, let's move on to our comment section because time is marching on once again. And I'm going to dedicate a large part of today's comment section to Hap B and Danny, who've been having a right old ding-dong on in our comments columns. Having a really, I'll have to say, a very respectful conversation between the two, debating various issues. So thank you to both of you for your interesting comments, which you've been following very, very closely. And I've just taken a few to select just to have a quick chat about. Hap B did make a comment about RT, Russia Today, is an extension of the Godi media sending out propaganda against Khalistan. It's Modi's friendship with Putin. Of course, we've talked a lot about in India's historic ties with Russia. Russia may even be involved in the poisoning of Avtar Singh Kandar. Well, that's interesting. I hadn't even thought about that angle. But of course, Russia has a track record of poisoning dissidents here in the UK. We have all sorts of quite shocking examples, quite incredible examples. And of course, as I've said in the past, Russia does have this really mature, really successful, really effective intelligence operation that's been going on for decades. It certainly had the capability to murder Avtar Singh Kandar on behalf of India. Russia understands the reality and strength of Khalistan. Indeed, it does. And as you say, India's trying to hide behind Russia and China because their truth is being exposed. And I think there you're absolutely right. Now, Danny, it came back to say, I've been hearing this for 25 years. All that keeps happening, India's improving. Well, I did chuckle at this because... Yeah, I mean, that's a very debatable point, Danny. And I think India has been improving for 25 years. I mean, it's almost inevitable it had to be. Its population and therefore almost by simple momentum, its GDP will have grown purely because it's become now the most populous country. It's overtaken China. So yeah, in 25 years, it has grown. Has it improved? Well, that's the debatable comment. In some areas it has. It has a space program. It leads the world in certain areas. But it also has the most terrible levels of poverty. And and even we've talked recently about this dreadfully growing, this wealth gap that's growing. The middle class is disappearing, but it's certainly reducing significantly in India. And is India going in the right direction? That's the big question. Is India moving towards a democratic model, or is it moving more towards a totalitarian model? That, Danny, I think is the key question here. And interestingly, and I did pick up this one of your comments you made later on. You said Indian Muslims are more patriotic than Hindus now. That's an interesting comment. I wonder why. I don't know. It's interesting that the Hindu right-wing extremists are really vehemently quite rude about the Muslim population of India. But it's ironic then that if the right-wing extremists, who tend to be the nationalists, are you now saying that Indian Muslims are more patriotic than maybe even most Hindus? Interesting concept, James.
Absolutely. And I think that a part of it, Angus, is that in a lot of cultures, it's the minorities that really appreciate what they have, what they are a part of. And I think that, for example, whether it is, fifth, sixth generation Canadians or Americans or British, I think that there is almost a level of entitlement by people of the majority. And I think that that actually creates the minority actually having such a great appreciation for it. And I see that with a lot of immigrants that come to Canada. They work their asses off to achieve and to make a better future, and they really appreciate the opportunities. Whereas a lot of, we could say white, but it's not even just the white people. It's people that have been here for generations. Generations are a lot lazier and not willing to put in the work because they feel more entitled to everything. So yeah, I do think that there has been change in India over 25 years. And I do think there's a reason why we see in all different countries the minorities having a lot more respect and appreciation for where they are.
Indeed, and the debate continued between Hatby and Danny. It went off in all sorts of interesting directions. And Hatby, you sadly quite poignantly said you remember this Chiching Singpura massacre. And as you said, it could well have been your own father or brother. It could have been us. Their only crime was that they lived in India. It was. The victims of this massacre were just simple villagers. They were the most innocent of innocent. It was absolutely outrageous, the act. And Danny then says, let me tell you from a Hindu view how it's impossible that the Hindu government could have done this. And I didn't know this, but this is interesting. Danny says, Sikh Kashmiris are actually converts from Brahmins. They are Brahmins, apparently, who've converted to Sikhi. Is that true? I didn't know, but according to Danny, it is. To kill a Brahmin for a Hindu excommunicates a Hindu, cannot attain any Hindu afterlife, you're eternally condemned, you go to hell, basically. It really is the worst thing that you could ever do. So interesting. So Danny says, look, there's no way that Hindus, in other words, the Indian army, could have perpetrated this massacre, because what they effectively would have been doing, they would have been killing fellow Hindus. They just happened to be Hindus who converted to Sikhi. So therefore, they would be damned to hell if they'd done it. So there's no way that they could have done it, which I think is interesting. And I didn't know this. And I think the bit I really find fascinating is that Sikh Kashmiris are actually ex-Brahmins, which is interesting. And Stay Safe waded into this debate, and you made a comment saying that's why some Sikhs left, another went to Khalistan, eradicating language, modifying the faith, and deleting when Sikh want peace too. Only the state is doing the crime, not you, so stay out of it. Well, that was a pretty robust slap to Danny, so thank you, Stay Safe. But I think you were quite brave wading into this debate between Danny and Hatby. And Hatby finishes off with an interesting comment. Yeah, look, the British unfairly divided Punjab. Yeah, I mean, I'd have to totally agree with that. That was their mistake, which they will fix. Well, as I often say, why do I get so passionate about Khalistan is because I, as a British citizen, do feel a certain responsibility for the acts of my predecessors. And I think the British as a nation, have a moral responsibility to help establish Khalistan because of what we did. We not only defeated the Sikh Empire in the first place. I mean, that was just empires coming up against empires. It happens. But what was unforgivable, it was the division of the Punjab during partition. That is something that we as a nation have a responsibility, I think, to fix. India continued to break and divide Punjab. So yeah, is that the fault of the British too? That wasn't the British. That was India. That was, in fact, the Brahmins really responsible for that. Or the ongoing genocide against Sikhs. That is really what the Hindus and what Hatby is going back to Danny, James. This is what really I think is the argument. It's saying, look, you can't blame anybody else. The Hindus have got it in for the Sikhs. That really is what this whole argument is all about. And Hatby is saying, look, it is the Hindus that have, or no, it's certainly a certain section. As we often say, it's the Brahmins. We know it's the Brahmins particularly who have it in for the Sikhs. Why? Because the Sikhs have this, they recognise the Brahmins for what they are. At the top of that caste system, it's the Sikhs who are trying to break down this caste system, or at least make people aware that they are living in this prison of the caste system. And Danny says, no. Danny's totally rejecting this, saying, no, there's no way that it's the Hindus who are targeting the Sikhs. So, where to begin on this one, James?
Absolutely. And I mean, you can go back in history to the late 1800s, early 1900s with the governor of Bombay, Mr. Nepean, and, put blame on the shoulders there for not laying the groundwork for what happened, in 1947. There should have been groundwork long ago when they actually took over the Sikh Empire and brought the colonization there. They should have had a groundwork to make sure they recognized the Sikh people, what they took from them, and to make sure that it was returned, and they failed to do that in the 1947 partition. And it's amazing when we watch all of these different debates on the comment section, how different parts of history that we don't know about are brought up, and really encourages us to go and go down those rabbit holes to extend our research and our awareness. So again, thanks for the great debates that happen on the comment section.
Indeed. So thanks to you two for that. That was great fun to read and interesting to hear both your very differing perspectives on all those issues. Right, final set of comments. Balbir Kaur says, "Wow, Angus, can you really read Punjabi? That was brilliant." Well, thank you very much. I don't think it really was. Even our kids can't read that fast, but they're learning. Every Sikh child should know their own language. That is really important. Punjabi, get out there, learn it. Really important. Otherwise, it will be gone forever. Certainly, that's what the Indian state are trying to do. They're trying to drive out the Punjabi language. So it is so important that it is kept alive, that families keep it within, they teach their young generation. So thank you. Now, talking, James, about our high levels of Punjabi, there were a couple of Punjabi comments that came in. Gurdwara Singh, Khalsa, said, "A programme in Punjabi, which hona jaruri karu." So thank you so much. And it had 5 upvotes, and this was followed by Jagrishang Singh, who said the following, and I'm going to read this Punjabi. "Sahi ki haji Zakara Taran Salata Ho Javi Tam Sanuvi Saba Samaja Laga Ja Ugi." Now, James, and I must confess, thank you to Google Translate for all that. No, I do not speak Punjabi, as you can probably glean from my butchering of that pronunciation. But what that does translate as, according to Google Translate, you're right. If it's translated, we'll understand everything too. I think, James, these 2 comments, and I'm sure our audience will correct me on this, but I believe these 2 comments are implying, why don't we translate our shows into Punjabi? Well, all I would say is we don't have that capability yet, but what I would point you, of course, look at up, we have a large Punjabi section of the channel. Go watch Surinder Singh and his programs, all in Punjabi. If you really need Punjabi programs and you only speak Punjabi, go to the Punjabi side of the channel. Unfortunately, James and I were trying our best, but our Punjabi is a long way off, is it not, James?
Absolutely. And maybe I'll do a segment next week and actually show you how you can get the subtitles to come up on YouTube and convert them to Punjabi. I'll do a little segment on that next week so you can figure out how to at least get the subtitles converted to Punjabi, and you can follow along if you don't have the strongest of English skills. And yeah, I don't know how accurate it is. I don't put my whole faith in their translation program. But again, I'll do a segment next week and I'll show you how you can use that.
Fantastic. Well done, James. And the final couple of comments go to Jora Rai, who says, "America, Khalistan, Canada, Zindabad, India, Russia, Murderabad." Absolutely right. And the final comment from Satbach Singh says, "Nice pair of honest guys, James." Apparently we are honest. I'm delighted to read that.
Absolutely. Thank you for the compliments. And yeah, we just try to bring the truth.
We do our best, as always. But that is it for another week. Thank you so much for staying with us, as always. Do keep those comments coming in. Thank you so much for your interesting debates that have been going on in the comments columns. They're always fascinating. We do read every single comment. They're always very interesting to read. Do keep the educational comments coming in. I do see loads of comments coming in with pointing us in all sorts of really interesting avenues to explore. So we're really looking forward to getting our teeth into researching some of those stories. So thanks for those. Do keep those coming in. Don't forget you can message us directly at satlogetv.com on anything that you'd like to highlight directly to us that you don't want to put in the public domain. Do keep an eye out for my podcast that will be released tomorrow. But in the meantime, that is it from me. It is a goodbye from me, a goodbye from James.
And a quick correction there. It is Saturday that the events are happening at Surrey City Hall to kick off the Sikh Heritage Month here in British Columbia. So again, it's Saturday at City Hall, not Sunday. But thank you again. Stay safe, everyone.
Indeed, do turn up on the right day. But that is it for another week. You have, of course, been watching Perspectives. We will see you next time.